Paddington Bear, the iconic character from British children's literature, is known for his tendency to get himself into trouble through innocent obliviousness. There's some level of irony in how that relates to this story about a Paddington bench and the horrific crimes it found itself at the centre of. But I can't precisely articulate it, as I've had quite a taxing weekend, so I'll just tell you the entire story. First appearing in 1958, Paddington is a famously well-loved character by both children and adults. Actually, probably more so adults at this stage. I don't know if he's seen as quite so iconic outside of these two islands. There might be room enough for only one English Bear children's character in most people's hearts, but I think the majority of my audience is probably at least aware of Paddington, right? I think those movies that came out a while ago were pretty successful internationally. The most recent one, Paddington in Peru, came out in 2024. To promote the release of Paddington in Peru, the film studio Studio Canal unveiled the Paddington Bear statue trail. They had installed these seated Paddington statues in 23 locations across the UK and Ireland. Don't get too excited, my fellow potato eaters. The two locations in Ireland are Westport Mayo and Newtonards Down. Not even places you might ever have occasion to visit. No, the Paddington Bear bench location we're interested in is Newbury, Berkshire. Because on the 2nd of March 2025, residents were horrified to discover their Paddington was gone. Well, his arse was still there, but what happened to the rest of him? The Newbury Business Improvement District described that fateful Sunday morning at 7:30 when we realised something awful had happened. We were beyond upset. Further saying the town of Newbury came together in a moment of grief. A plastic tent was placed around the Paddington Bear bench, as if there had been a murder, until the jagged remains of the statue could be removed. And then in its place, this sign went up. Paddington has had to leave on a short adventure, but we hope to bring him back soon. Now, who would vandalise the Paddington Bear bench in such barbaric fashion? Thankfully, the crime did occur in a business district in the UK, so there was obviously cameras everywhere. On review of the footage, the police saw the incident unfold in the early hours of the morning. Two young gentlemen approached the Paddington Bear bench, probably returning from some reputable establishment or high-minded institute, and, oh my god, don't they know what they're doing? That's the Paddington Bear bench. Oh, I can't watch. The two men then take Paddington with them in a taxi with what must have been the world's least discerning taxi driver. I can understand if your passengers entered a taxi with a road sign or traffic cone, you just turn a blind eye. That happens all the time. But that's a whole ass Paddington. At any point did the driver not say, "Lads, you're probably going to get in trouble for that, and if the police question me, I am 100% grassing you up." Apparently the taxi driver kept those thoughts to himself, and he drove the two to the nearby Royal Air Force Base. Police then found Paddington in a car at the base and soon found the car's owner, 22-year-old William Lawrence, who was one of the men in the CCTV footage. His accomplice, 22-year-old Daniel Heath, was also on the RAF base. The two of them were Air Force engineers. On closer inspection, this does appear to be the work of an accomplished engineer. The two wound up in court, pleading guilty to criminal damage and apologising for their actions. Despite the case receiving quite a lot of publicity, I couldn't find a published motive for the despicable attack. I suppose just looking at the footage gives a pretty clear indication. The judge sentenced the men to community service and a £2,725 fine, and admonished them with some remarks that thankfully were published. Paddington Bear is a beloved cultural icon with children and adults alike. He represents kindness, tolerance and promotes integration and acceptance in our society. His famous label attached to his duffel coat, "Please look after this bear. Your actions were the antithesis of everything Paddington stands for." After a monologue like that, I'd be seeking an appeal to have the judge struck from the case for pro-Paddington bias. What in God's name was he talking about? The antithesis of everything Paddington stands for? The lads were members of the Royal Air Force, not Paddington's Marmalade Brigade. This fella made it sound like they had committed an act of treason. There should be a judicial oversight committee investigating the possibility that this judge is a close relative of Paddington. Anyways, the Paddington Bear bench was restored, much to the relief of the local community, who cheered and applauded when it was unveiled, with the Newbury Business Improvement District commenting, "We had no idea that he was so loved by Newbury. It's just been amazing, and we are delighted with everyone's comments." The lesson here is do not mess with the Paddington Bear bench. In fact, for your own safety, here are the locations of all 23 Paddington Bear benches. If you are planning a night of drunken debauchery or otherwise irresponsible behaviour, make sure you do it away from these locations. Paddington is personally defenceless, but he has a lot of friends, which is a dangerous combination of traits for people who struggle with the concept of consequences. I mean, when members of the British Armed Forces are held accountable for their actions, that's when you know it's serious. Do not mess with the Paddington Bear bench. But do watch more of my videos. I've made like over 300 of them. You can subscribe to see more in the future, join the channel membership to support my work, and until next time, stay safe. There might be room enough for only one English Bear children's character and most people aren't. What? Paddington is a famously well-loved character by both children and adults. Not even places you might even... It was a pretty shit to take. Alright, well, that's a warm-up. It's just been amazing, and we are delighted with everyone's comments. Comment on that, fucker.